I was standing by the soup pot, same as always, until the metal ladle cut the air and hit my temple. Who cooks like that? My son was in the living room. He just turned the TV volume up. The sound got bigger, and I got smaller. 5 minutes later, the kitchen exploded, dishes shattered, and I was on the floor. They thought I was useless. They didn't know I held the last card, not the police. The deed. The deed to the entire building they live in. My name is Lorraine Keaton. I am 68 years old. I was standing at the stove in my son's kitchen, doing what I did every Tuesday evening, stirring the vegetable soup. The aroma of simmering celery, carrots, and thyme was the only pleasant thing in the room. I was tasting the broth for salt when the air beside my head seemed to split. Brooke, my daughter-in-law, had snatched the heavy stainless steel ladle from my hand. I didn't even have time to turn before she swung it. The metal edge struck my temple. The pain was sharp, a bright, metallic burst. But the heat was worse. Boiling soup splashed from the ladle, scalding my cheek and the side of my neck. I hissed. A sound lost in the sudden spike of noise from the other room. From the living room, the volume of the television doubled. A game show host was screaming about a new car. Adam, my son. He had heard the contact, the sharp clack of metal against bone, and his immediate, instinctive reaction was to turn up the sound, to make it go away. Who cooks like that? Brooke's voice was low and tight, full of a disgust that had been simmering for months. The ladle wasn't hot enough for her. She had to add the venom. It smells like food for pigs. No wonder you set off the smoke alarm last week. She dropped the ladle. It hit the immaculate white tile floor with a loud, declarative clang. The sound was sharp, brittle. My vision swam. The floor felt unsteady, tilting beneath my feet. I wasn't going to fall, but I reached out, my fingers splaying against the cold quartz countertop to brace myself. The stone was solid, real. My temple throbbed, a dull, heavy pulse against the ringing bells and applause from the television. The skin on my cheek was already tightening from the burn. It wasn't the first time she had been cruel. It wasn't even the first time she'd been physical. She was fond of gripping my arm too tightly, of shoving past me in the narrow hallway. But this was different. This was an attack. And Adam turned up the TV. The humiliation was a physical thing, a sickness rising from my stomach. I had become a background noise to be managed, an inconvenience. The months of small insults, of being corrected like a child, of my food being thrown away, all of it compressed into this single, hot moment. I don't remember deciding to do it. My hand, the one not pressed against the cold counter, was shaking. It moved. It swept across the stainless steel drying rack next to the sink. The sound was glorious. It was louder than the television, a cascade of shattering glass as the water tumblers hit the floor. My hand moved again, connecting with the stack of heavy ceramic bowls Brooke loved so much. They exploded, a white porcelain rain, loud and sharp and clean. A pot lid spun off the counter and clattered. The wooden knife block tipped over, sending knives skittering across the floor. I wasn't screaming. The glass was screaming for me. The noise finally cut through the game show. Adam ran in. He stopped dead at the threshold, his eyes wide. He didn't look at me. He didn't look at the red welt rising on my temple or the soup dripping from my chin. He looked at the mess. The floor was a sea of broken white ceramic, shattered glass, and pools of green gold soup. "What are you doing? Mum?" His voice wasn't worried. It was annoyed. The tone of a man whose evening had been profoundly interrupted. He didn't move toward me. He didn't step into the kitchen. He just stood there, a safe 4 yards away. "She's crazy," Brooke said. She had backed up against the refrigerator, pulling her silk robe tighter, as if I were the threat. "Adam, she's completely lost it. She's destroying your kitchen." I didn't answer them. I was breathing hard. I looked down at the floor, at the chaos I had made. Amid the destruction, a long, thin trail of green soup had splashed from a broken bowl. It ran across the white tile, a dark, jagged line, like a single thread pulled loose from a tapestry. They saw a mess. They saw an old woman having a breakdown. I looked at that thin line of soup, and I made a silent vow. It was a thread, and I was going to use it to sew my entire life back together. It had only been 6 months. 6 months since I found Walter. He was in the backyard of our house in Maple Bridge, just outside Portland, kneeling by the climbing roses he'd spent 30 years coddling. He hadn't been sick. He was just gone. The hose was still running, spilling a quiet stream of water over his favorite brown work shoes. The paramedics were kind, but firm. I remember standing there after they took him, just staring at those shoes. The leather was dark, soaked through, caked with rich soil. They looked like a statue left out in the rain, a small, sad monument to the exact second my life had stopped. The house in Maple Bridge became too large overnight. It wasn't just the physical space, it was the volume of the silence. Every room echoed with the things he wasn't doing. The kitchen was too quiet. The porch swing was too still. Our wedding photograph on the mantel, the one from 1975, seemed to turn a deeper shade of yellow, a fading, brittle promise. After a few weeks, Adam started calling. Then he started visiting, his face tight with a son's manufactured concern. "Mum, you can't stay here," he insisted, standing in the foyer, refusing to sit. "It's too much for you. You're older now. It's dangerous to be alone." Dangerous. That was the word he used. Not lonely. Not sad. Dangerous. As if I were a child who might wander into traffic. I was tired. The grief was heavy. A wet wool blanket I couldn't seem to shrug off. "So," I agreed. I packed up my life into 4 suitcases, leaving the roses untrimmed and Walter's shoes exactly where they were by the garden tap. He moved me into their apartment at Harborview Ridge. The lobby was all chrome and glass, smelling faintly of industrial cleaner and something trying to be lavender. When the elevator opened onto their floor, Brooke was waiting at the door. She smiled, a quick, bright flash of teeth, but the smile never reached her eyes. Her eyes remained flat, assessing. "Welcome, Lorraine," she said. Her voice was as sleek and cold as the apartment. "We're so glad you're here. Just call me Brooke." It wasn't a request. It was an instruction. It established the boundary immediately. We would never be family. The apartment was overwhelming. Everything was low profile, grey and reflective. Glass tables, stainless steel appliances, leather sofas that looked as though they had never actually been sat on. It was a magazine cover, not a home. My room, of course, was not part of the magazine. It was what they called the den. It was a small, airless box at the end of the hall, barely large enough for a twin bed and a small dresser. It had no closet, just a metal rack in the corner. The room's single window, narrow and high, looked directly onto a dark brick alleyway and the humming, massive air conditioning units of the next building. I didn't complain. I unpacked my grey dresses and folded my cardigans. I hung the one picture I'd brought Walter, squinting happily into the sun on our last trip to the coast, his hair messy from the wind. I placed it on the small particle board desk. I looked at his face, and I looked at the grey walls, and I told myself what I had to do. Be quiet. Be small. Don't be a burden. Just disappear. My new life began. I made myself useful. I was up every morning at 6, before the alarm, before the sun bothered to light up the alley. I'd start the coffee, the expensive, bitter kind Brooke insisted on, measuring it perfectly. I'd make eggs, scrambling them light and fluffy, the way Adam used to like them when he was a boy. Adam would stumble out, already checking his phone, his tie undone. "Thanks, Mum," he'd mumble, taking the plate, his eyes already on the first email of the day. He never looked at me. Brooke was different. She inspected. "The coffee is weak again. Lorraine," she'd say, pouring half her cup down the sink. "You have to use 3 scoops, not 2.5. How hard is that to remember? These eggs are too salty. I can't eat this. Did you use the wrong sponge on the non-stick pan? You'll ruin the finish." There was never a thank you, not once. Just a running tally of my failures, delivered with the casual disinterest of someone correcting a poorly programmed appliance. I held on to the hope that it was enough. Being useful was my rent. If I did the laundry, wiped the counters, and stayed out of the way, I had a place. I was earning my keep. But that hope was getting thin. It was wearing away, getting grey and frayed, like the edge of the old dishcloth I used to wipe up their spills, the one they wouldn't even touch. The tension had been building for weeks, like a hairline crack in a dam. The day it finally broke. Brooke lost a major contract. I knew because I heard the final clipped phone call. She clicked her laptop shut with a sound like a gunshot. After that, the apartment became a minefield. "Why is this coffee cup here?" she snapped, holding up a mug I'd left by the sink. Not in the sink. By it. "The towels in the dryer. You didn't fold them. They're going to wrinkle. Can you just try to be useful? Lorraine. Just try." Her work calls were a constant barrage. She would pace the living room, her phone pressed to her ear, shouting about deadlines and incompetence and client expectations. When her battery died, she would throw the phone onto the granite island with a heavy, dramatic sigh. A sound clearly aimed at me, the only other person in the room. Adam saw it. He sat on the grey leather sofa, his own laptop open, and he would just flinch. A small, tight movement of his shoulders. Then he would reach for the remote. The volume would creep up. First a sports game, then a sitcom, then anything. The television became his cheap, flickering shield. He witnessed the small cruelties, the daily degradations, and he chose to watch a rerun of a show he didn't even like. Then came the soup, the ladle, the sharp, hot pain at my temple. In that second, as the boiling liquid ran down my face and Adam turned the TV volume to its absolute maximum, I saw my position with perfect, terrible clarity. I wasn't a mother. I wasn't a guest. I was free labor. I was the person who absorbed the day's frustrations, the invisible, silent woman who cooked and cleaned and existed to be blamed. So when my hand swept across the drying rack, it was a shock, even to me. But after that first crash of glass, a strange calm settled over me. I let my hands go. I pushed the heavy roasting pan off the counter. It hit the floor with a deafening boom. The stack of ceramic bowls followed, exploding in sharp, white bursts. It was the only voice I had left, and I was finally using it. When Adam ran in, his face was not concerned, but furious. "You're causing problems, Mum," he said. It wasn't an accusation. It was a diagnosis, a pre-rehearsed formula for a situation he had clearly anticipated. Brooke stepped up beside him, her hand on his arm. She didn't look at the mess. She looked at him. "Choose Adam," she said, her voice perfectly calm, perfectly lethal. "It's her, or it's me. I will not live in a madhouse." She had placed the knife directly on the artery, and she knew he didn't have the strength to refuse. He didn't even hesitate. He didn't look at me. He looked at the floor, at the wall, at the ceiling. "Mum, I think you need your own space. Brooke and we need our space." He went to his wallet. He pulled out 2 bills and pressed them into my hand. $200. It wasn't a gift. It was a severance. A final, cheap invoice for 6 months of my life. I went to my room. I packed my 4 suitcases. I didn't say another word. They stood in the living room, not watching me, but listening to the sound of my zippers. I pulled my bags across their sleek, polished floor. I walked out of apartment 16B and didn't look back. As the heavy door clicked shut behind me, the last things I heard were the faint, sharp smell of the spilled vegetable soup hanging in the air, and the overwhelming, drowning sound of the television, which was still on, louder than ever. The $200 didn't last. It bought me 3 nights at the Starlight Motel, a place off the interstate where the neon sign hummed and the no in no vacancy flickered like a nervous tick. The room smelled like stale smoke and bleach. The heater, a rattling brown box under the window, clanked all night, pushing out waves of dusty, lukewarm air that did nothing to fight the damp November cold. The money evaporated. It went to the room, to a few cups of bitter coffee from the gas station, and a bag of pretzels. By the morning of the 4th day, I had $8.17 left. I couldn't afford another night. I checked out, dragging my 4 suitcases to the bus stop. I rode the line downtown and got off at Waterfront Park. I found a bench facing the Willamette River. The sky was a flat, heavy grey, the colour of wet concrete. I sat there for hours, clutching my handbag in my lap, my suitcases clustered around my feet like a barricade. I watched the water, dark and choppy. A tugboat passed, pushing a barge, and its horn sounded a long, low, mournful sound that vibrated in my chest. The cold started in my feet and worked its way up, deep into my bones. As the afternoon faded, a man bundled in layers of mismatched coats shuffled over and sat on the other end of my bench. He looked at me for a long time, not with curiosity, but with a kind of professional assessment. "You're new," he said. It wasn't a question. I just nodded, my throat too tight to speak. He reached into his plastic bag and pulled out half a loaf of bread, dark and stale. He broke off a piece. "Eat this," he said, holding it out. I looked at his hand, dirty and chapped, and at the bread. "No, thank you. Eat it, lady. Pride don't keep you warm." I took the bread. It was hard. but I was hungry. I ate it, chewing slowly, forcing it down. "Thank you," I whispered. He just grunted. "Trinity Church, over on Burnside. They got soup. Tuesdays and Thursdays. Today's Tuesday. You got an hour." I found the church. There was already a line stretching down the block from the basement entrance. People with carts. People with backpacks. People with nothing but the clothes they were wearing. I stood at the end of it, pulling the collar of my coat up, trying to make myself invisible. I kept my head down, just high enough to see the feet in front of me, shuffling forward. I took the styrofoam cup of thin potato soup and the roll. I ate it standing in an alley, trying not to cry. This was my life now. Night came. I tried to sleep in the covered entryway of a closed office building. I must have dozed off, because a sharp tapping on the sole of my shoe woke me. A police officer. "Ma'am, you can't sleep here," he said, his voice tired, not unkind. "I'm sorry. I don't have anywhere?" "The shelters are full," he said, anticipating my question. "It's too cold tonight. You've got to keep moving. I can't let you stay here." I went to the all-night transit center. I tried the women's shelter on the off chance he was wrong. "Come back tomorrow," the woman at the desk said, not looking up. "We're full." Sometime around 2 a.m, sitting in the hard plastic chair of the transit center, I took out my phone. The battery was at 4%. I sent Adam a message. "I am cold. I have nowhere to go. Please help me." I watched it. The message delivered. A few minutes later, the little read notification appeared under the text. I waited. I stared at the screen until the battery died and the phone went black. No reply came. That little blue word, read, felt like a door slamming shut, a deadbolt sliding into place. It was a duller, deeper cut than the ladle. The next day, I washed my face in the cold, metallic water of a public restroom sink. I looked at myself in the mirror. The fluorescent light was unforgiving. The welt on my temple, where the ladle had struck, had blossomed into a spectacular, ugly bruise. It was a dark, swollen purple, edged with yellow. But as I looked closer, I saw my eyes. They weren't the eyes of a victim. They weren't broken. They were just clear. They were bright with a cold, hard anger. By evening, hunger was a gnawing, physical pain. Shame was a luxury I could no longer afford. I walked down the alley behind the restaurants on the harbour. I found a clean bag of day-old rolls, discarded by a bakery. I took them. I sat behind a dumpster and ate, the shame burning in my throat, but the hunger winning. I needed to reorganize. I couldn't keep dragging 4 suitcases. I opened the largest one, looking for items I could throw away to lighten the load. Tucked in the zippered lining, a place I hadn't looked in months, was a thick, brown manila envelope. It was Walter's handwriting, neat, slanted, unmistakable. It just said, "Lorraine." My fingers fumbled with the clasp. I hadn't packed this. Walter must have put it there, maybe before our last trip, as one of his just-in-case measures. Inside, there wasn't a letter. There wasn't cash. There was just a single, small, brass key. It was attached to a simple plastic tag with a number written on it in black marker 173. A P.O. box key. I found the post office branch address in a small address book Walter had tucked into the lining of my suitcase. It was an old federal building downtown, the kind with marble floors that click and echo with every step. The P.O. boxes were in a quiet, high-ceilinged room in the back, a wall of small, gleaming brass doors. I found number 173. The small brass key felt cold in my palm. It slid into the lock with a smooth, oiled precision. Walter's precision. The door swung open. Inside, there was a single, thick, 9 by 12 manila envelope, sealed with heavy-duty tape. I took it to a wooden bench in the corner, my back to the room. My fingers were clumsy and stiff from the cold as I tore it open. On top, there was a letter, handwritten on Walter's thick, cream-coloured personal stationery. "My dearest Lorraine," it began. "If you are reading this, it means two things. First, that I am no longer with you. And second, that you are in the kind of trouble I always prayed would never find you." I had to stop and take a breath. "I am sorry." The letter continued. "I am sorry I kept this part of my life separate from yours. I did it because I wanted you to live, truly live, without the burden of managing it. I wanted you to be my wife, not my business partner, but I knew that if I was gone, you might need a shield. This, Lorraine, is your shield. It is not my secret. It is your armor. Do not let anyone, not even Adam, tell you what it is or what it is worth. Your name is on everything that matters. This is your life, bought and paid for. Use it to protect yourself." My hands were shaking. Beneath the letter were documents, thick, professionally bound folders. I opened the first one. It was a summary of assets held by something called the North Wind Family Trust. I flipped a page, and another. It wasn't just our house in Maple Bridge. It was a list, 11 properties, a row of retail shops on the east side, an office building on Stark Street, a portfolio of index funds so large the number of zeros didn't seem real. And then I saw it. A multi-unit residential property, Harborview Ridge. My breath stopped. I read it again, and again. The chrome lobby, the lavender-scented air, the grey leather sofas, the tiny, airless den with the view of the alley. Adam and Brooke weren't just living there. They were living in my building. The shock was a physical blow, a sudden emptiness in my chest. It was immediately followed by a wave of anger so hot and so pure it burned the tears from my eyes. I had been eating stale bread from a stranger's hand. I had been turned away from a shelter. I had stood in a soup line. I had been picking through the garbage bins for day-old rolls. I had been eating garbage outside a building that I owned. I thought of Adam. I thought of my text message. "I am cold." I thought of the read notification. He had read my plea for help while sitting in my apartment, in my building, and had let his mother freeze on the street. Tucked into the flap of the main envelope was a single, heavy business card. Victor Hale, Hale and Cole, attorneys at law. On the back, in Walter's neat hand, "Vic will handle everything. He keeps the keys." I fumbled in my pocket for the last of my change. I found a payphone in the lobby. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped the quarter twice. I dialed the number. A crisp, professional voice answered. "Hale and Cole?" "I need to speak to Victor Hale," I said. My voice was a hoarse whisper. "Please, tell him Lorraine Keaton is calling." There was no hold music. There was not even a pause. Just an immediate, sharp click. "Lorraine." The voice was deep, warm, and filled with a sudden, urgent relief. "My God, we've been trying to find you since Walter's service. We sent letters to the house. Where are you? I'm at the Federal Building Post Office. I managed. I have the package. Don't move, he said, his voice firm. All business now. Our office is on Morrison. A car will be at your location in less than 5 minutes. It's a black sedan. The driver's name is Arthur. He will take care of you. Just get in. 4 minutes later, the sedan glided to the curb. A man in a black suit got out. He didn't look at my 4 worn suitcases. He didn't look at my dirty coat. He just opened the back door. Mrs. Keaton, Mr. Hale is waiting. The office was on the top floor, all glass and polished dark wood, overlooking the entire city. The receptionist at the front desk looked up, her eyes immediately locked on the dark, purple bruise on my temple. Her professional smile faltered for just 1 second. Then she glanced at her screen. Mrs. Keaton, please, go right in. Mr. Hale is expecting you. Victor Hale was a tall man, impeccably dressed, with Walter's eyes kind but intelligent and missing nothing. Lorraine, he said, taking both my hands. I am so terribly sorry for your loss. And I am even more sorry, he added, his gaze flicking to my face, for what has clearly happened since. He sat me down, and in front of me, he opened a thick, leather-bound ledger. It was the map of my new world. Income statements, expense reports, rent rolls. Walter was my best friend. Lorraine, he said gently. He set this up specifically because he worried about Adam's judgment. He turned to the rent roll for Harborview Ridge. He ran his finger down the list. Ah, he said. Here we are. He turned the book around. I saw the list of tenants, and I saw one line, circled in red ink by an accountant. Apartment 16B, tenant Adam Keaton, status preferential contract. What does that mean? I asked. Victor's face hardened. It means Walter was letting him live there for $100 a month, utilities included. A gift. A contract that, I must add, expired upon Walter's death. Adam has been ignoring our letters requesting a new, market-rate lease for 6 months. Victor Hale's office became my new headquarters. He had me settled in a long-stay hotel suite that first night, with a retainer and a new set of credit cards in my name. The next morning, we began. Walter was a very wealthy man. Lorraine, Victor said, sliding a thick, bound report across his polished desk. He was also a very quiet one. Your total net worth, between the real estate and the market funds, is approximately $9.2 million. I stared at the number. It was just ink on paper. It didn't feel real. More importantly, he continued, tapping a specific column, the assets generate a net positive cash flow, after all expenses, taxes, and management fees, of between $34,000 and $38,000 a month. You never have to touch the principal. I thought of the $8.17 in my pocket. I thought of the stale bread. My first decision was to create a buffer. At Victor's advice, we formed a new entity, Northwind Harbour LLC, which would now formally manage the properties. It was a shield, a legal entity that was not Lorraine Keaton. It was a name that had no memory of being hit with a ladle. My second decision was to standardize everything. No more special favors, I told Victor. No more preferential contracts. Everyone pays market rate, or they leave. We will follow every state and local law to the letter, but the discounts are over, starting with apartment 16B. I set my principles right then. We would be absolutely rigid with those who abused their position. We would be flexible and compassionate with tenants in genuine need. The line would be clear. Before I returned to Harbourview Ridge, an idea that still made my stomach clench, I needed to stop looking like the person who had left it. I wasn't putting on a costume. I was shedding one. I didn't buy expensive, flashy clothes. I went to a proper department store and bought 3 perfectly tailored wool suits in charcoal, navy, and black. I bought 4 simple silk blouses. I got new glasses, with thin, modern frames. I had my hair cut into a neat, short style that was efficient and clear. I had a manicure, not for the colour, but to repair the nails that were split and broken from scrubbing their floors and washing their dishes. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't see a victim. I saw a manager. I saw the woman Walter had married. The next 2 weeks were an education. Victor's team brought me binders. I learned to read a cash flow statement. I learned the difference between operating expenses and capital reserves. I stayed up late in my quiet hotel suite, highlighting maintenance budgets and vendor contracts. I enrolled in an online property management course. I learned about legal notices, eviction processes, and tenant rights. Then, I focused on my building. I ordered a full audit of Harbourview Ridge. I reviewed every tenant file. I saw who paid on time, who was always late. I read the noise complaints, many of which were directed at apartment 16B. Then, I asked Victor for something specific. "There's a security camera in the hallway on the 16th floor," I said. "Right by the elevators." "Yes," he said. "It's standard." "Does it record audio?" He checked. "It does. It's meant to capture verbal altercations." "I need the recording," I said. "From Tuesday, November 5th, from about 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. He had it by that afternoon. We watched it together in his office. The angle was high, but the audio was perfectly, horribly clear. You could hear the distant clack of metal. You could hear the game show volume suddenly blast from inside the apartment, drowning out my cry of pain. You could hear the crash of glass and porcelain. And then, you could hear the voices clearly at the door. "Brooke, choose, Adam, it's her or it's me." Adam, "Mom, I think you need your own space." Victor saved the file. He labelled it evidence. The next day, his office drafted the first notice. It was not a personal letter. It was a formal, legal document delivered by certified mail. It was a 30-day notice of a rent adjustment for apartment 16B in full compliance with Oregon state housing law. The new rent, effective the first of the following month, would be the standard market rate for a 2-bedroom unit in that building, $2,400. It was signed. Hale and Cole, legal counsel for Northwind Harbor LLC. It took less than 24 hours for the call to come. Brooke, naturally. She didn't call Adams Mom. She called the management number listed in the lobby, that number now routed directly to Victor's firm. "Who the hell is Northwind Harbor?" she screamed at the legal secretary who answered the phone. "This is harassment. I demand to speak to the owner of this building. Now." The secretary, a calm woman named Ms. Peters, did not raise her voice. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but the owners do not handle tenant relations directly. All correspondence must be submitted in writing to our legal counsel." And then, she politely disconnected the call. The first of the month arrived. The rent for apartment 16B did not. Our new system was automated. On the second day, An email was sent reminding them of the outstanding balance. On the third day, a formal, physical notice to pay or vacate was posted on their door by a third-party process server as required by law. It gave them 72 hours. The call came on the fourth day. It was Adam, not Brooke. He sounded small and nervous. He got Ms. Peters. "There's been a mistake," he stammered. "This rent increase. We can't pay this all at once. We need an installment plan. We've been here for years." Ms. Peters's voice was polite and firm. "I'm sorry, sir. Northwind Harbour does not offer payment plans for new leases. The full balance was due on the 1st. "But who can I talk to?" he pleaded. "This is ridiculous. I need to speak to the owner." "As I've informed your wife, sir, all correspondence must be in writing. The balance is now $2,400 plus a $100 late fee. It must be paid by 5 p. Tomorrow, or we will be forced to file for eviction." She disconnected the call. Because they were officially in default, Victor was now legally entitled to run a full credit check as part of the collections process. He laid the report on my desk. "This is why they can't pay," he said, tapping the paper. It was a financial house of cards. They were carrying over $30,000 in credit card debt across 6 different cards, all of them at the limit. A car loan for Brooke's luxury SUV that was almost $700 a month. And, most telling, a recent short-term payday loan for $5,000. The interest rate was 31.9%. They hadn't just been living on Adam's salary, they had been living on a fantasy. Then, the butterfly effect. 2 days later, I was reviewing the accounts for the Rivercrest building, the small office complex. One of the tenants, a mid-level marketing firm, had just broken their lease, paying the penalty. I asked Victor to look into it. "It's Brooke's company," he reported back that afternoon. Or, that marketing firm was her last major client. The firm just got bought out, and the new owners are cutting all external contracts to save money. I had to sit down. The small shockwave I had started in the kitchen had found its way across the city and collapsed the last pillar holding up their lives. The building manager at Harborview, a man I had retained, sent me a separate email. "Just a heads up, Mrs. Keaton. We've had 2 noise complaints this week from 16C and 16A. Shouting matches, every night. It's the tenants in 16B. I could picture it, the fear, the accusations, the blame. I learned from Victor's quiet inquiries that Adam was frantically calling friends, trying to borrow money. He was being met with polite refusals. Brooke, meanwhile, was seen by the lobby doorman accepting a delivery from a high-end designer boutique, a new handbag. As she signed for it, she was overheard on her phone, telling someone, "You have to spend money to project success. It's the only way to keep the clients you have left." They were drowning, and she was buying an anchor. When the 72-hour notice expired, Victor filed the forcible entry and detainer paperwork with the Multnomah County Court. It was a standard, impersonal eviction filing. Adam responded by hiring a lawyer, a young, eager attorney who probably charged a low, flat fee. The lawyer filed a motion to dismiss, claiming the rent increase was retaliatory and unconscionable. He didn't stand a chance. Victor's counterfiling was a slim, lethal package. It contained a copy of the original, expired preferential lease, clearly stating the $100 rate was a gift from Walter Keaton, terminable upon his death. A copy of the certified mail receipt for the 30-day notice of the change in terms. and a 3-page market analysis showing that our new rate of $2,400 was, in fact, slightly below the average for a comparable unit in the Pearl District. The judge dismissed their motion without a hearing. That same afternoon, I received an email routed through the general management portal. It was from the tenant in apartment 4G. Her name was Maria. Dear Management, it read, I am a night shift nurse at Good Samaritan and a single mother. My rent is increasing by $100 next month. I can pay it. But my car just broke down, and the repair is setting me back. Would it be possible to phase in the increase? Maybe $50 next month, and the full $100 after that. I have never been late with a payment. I pulled her file. She was right. 4 years in the building, and not one single late payment. I wrote a note to Victor. Grant her a 6-month rent freeze, no increase. After that, raise it only $50 and keep it there. Send her a letter thanking her for her work as a nurse and letting her know we value her as a tenant. I set the 2 files side by side on my desk. Apartment 16B and Apartment 4G. The line was drawn, it was sharp, and it was clear, and it was the new foundation for the rest of my life. I wore the charcoal grey wool suit. My hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and the thin-framed glasses gave me the anonymous, professional look of an accountant or a mid-level administrator. I sat in the 4th row of the Multnomah County courtroom. The room was small, panelled in dark wood, and smelled faintly of old paper and anxiety. Victor Hale sat at the plaintiff's table. He did not look at me. We had established this boundary. I was not a mother in that room. I was not a victim. I was an observer, an officer of the corporation, present to witness a standard business procedure. Adam and Brooke sat 2 rows ahead of me with a young lawyer who looked like he had just passed the bar. Adam wore a suit that was too large for him, and he stared intently at his hands, clasped in his lap. Brooke was rigid beside him. She wore a bright red dress, an act of defiance in the drab room. Her head was high, but I could see a muscle twitching in her jaw. They never looked back. They had no idea I was there. At 10:42 in the morning, the clerk called the case in a monotone voice. Docket number 25-104, Northwind Harbour LLC versus Adam Keaton and Brooke Keaton. They moved to the defendant's table. The judge, a practical-looking woman with greying hair and a tired expression, peered over her reading glasses. This is a forcible entry and detainer action for non-payment of rent. Mr. Hale, I assume your paperwork is in order? It is, Your Honour, Victor said, standing. And the defence? She asked, turning to Adam's lawyer. The young man stood, his papers rattling in his hand. Your Honour, we contest the eviction. My clients have resided in this unit for nearly 5 years. There was an established family understanding with the previous owner, a tradition. The judge sighed. Counsellor, I do not rule on tradition. I rule on contracts. Do you have a current, valid lease that substantiates this claim? Well, no, Your Honour. But the new owners raised the rent by an unconscionable amount. It's a predatory increase. My clients simply need time. They... Mr. Hale. The judge cut in, her patience clearly gone. Victor rose. He was a portrait of calm efficiency. Your Honour, the plaintiff, Northwind Harbour, is the legal owner of the property. The previous preferential lease was a personal arrangement with the former owner, Walter Keaton, now deceased. That contract terminated upon his death. We provided the tenants with a legal, written 30-day notice of the new market rate lease terms, sent via certified mail, as required by law. The tenants have failed to pay rent for 2 full months. He pushed a slim folder toward the clerk. In this file, you will find a copy of the expired lease, the receipt for the certified notice, a full market analysis demonstrating that the new rent is, in fact, average for the area, and copies of the formal notices to pay or vacate, which were unheeded. The judge took the folder and spent less than 2 minutes reviewing the documents. "Counselor," she said to Adam's lawyer, "this paperwork is ironclad. The notice was valid. The market rate is substantiated. Do your clients have the outstanding rent?" The lawyer looked at Adam. Adam looked at the floor. "Mr. Keaton," the judge asked directly. Adam stood up slowly. His voice was a rasp. "Your Honor, I don't. Not today. I lost my job. We've had a difficult time. I just need, if we could just have 90 days. 90 days to get back on our feet. That's all I'm asking." The judge shook her head before he even finished. "Mr. Keaton, I am not unsympathetic to your situation, but you are not asking me for mercy. You are asking me to deny a private business its legal property rights. I have no standing to do that. The law is explicit. The rent is due. It has not been paid. The request for a continuance is denied." She turned to her keyboard, and the clicking of the keys was the only sound in the room. Judgment for the plaintiff. Northwind Harbour, LLC. The defendants are ordered to vacate the premises within 10 days of today's date. If the full outstanding balance of $4,900, which includes rent, late fees, and today's legal costs, is not paid by that time, the sheriff will be authorized to proceed with a forced removal. We are adjourned. She banged the gavel. It was over. Brooke shot to her feet. "This is insane," she whispered, her voice a sharp, sibilant hiss. "This is completely unjust. Ms. Keaton, be quiet." Her lawyer warned, his hand on her arm. "I will not be quiet. This is—" "Ma'am," the bailiff said, taking a step toward her. "This court is adjourned." The lawyer grabbed Brooke by the elbow and physically pulled her toward the aisle and out the double doors. Adam didn't move for a long moment. He just stood there, a man completely hollowed out. Then he turned. His shoulders slumped, and followed the sound of his wife's anger into the hallway. I remained seated. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel joy. I felt the quiet click of a lock falling into place. My hand rose to my temple, my fingers tracing the faint, silvery line of the scar, which was now almost invisible. The throb was long gone. The pain had served its purpose. It had changed its name. It was no longer a wound. It was a receipt. The day after the judgment, Adam called Victor's office. He didn't ask for a lawyer. He was crying. He begged to speak to the owner, just for 5 minutes. "Please," he kept saying. "I just need to talk to them. I'll do anything." Victor passed the message to me. "It's your decision, Lorraine. You are under no obligation." "I'll see him," I said. "Here, in this office, tomorrow at 10. No one else, no Brooke, no lawyers." The next morning, I was sitting behind Victor's large mahogany desk when Ms. Peters showed him in. The desk was a fortress. On it, I had placed a single, small card holder with the name Northwind Harbour, LLC. Adam pushed the door open, his head down, his posture stooped. He looked like he had aged 10 years in 10 days. "Thank you for seeing me." He mumbled to the desk. I don't know who I'm speaking to, but I need. He looked up, and he saw me. Time just stopped. The air in the room became thick and heavy. His face went from pale to ashen. The blood drained from it completely. He couldn't form a word. His mouth opened and closed, but nothing came out. "Mom," he finally whispered. It was the sound of a ghost. "Sit down." "Adam?" I said. My voice was calm, measured, and held no warmth. It was the voice of a CEO. "Today, we are not mother and son. We are speaking as a landlord and a tenant in default. You asked for this meeting. You have 5 minutes." He collapsed into the leather chair opposite the desk. He just stared, his mind visibly failing to connect the pieces. "I don't understand," he stammered. "The money. Walter. How?" "Walter was a brilliant man," I said, my hands folded on the desk. He was also a man who knew his son. He left his entire estate, the buildings, the funds, everything to me, in an irrevocable trust. The Northwind Family Trust. He set it up to protect me. He set it up, I said, leaning forward slightly, so that no one, not even his own child, could take advantage of his wife after he was gone. He created this company so I could operate without being emotionally manipulated. It seems his foresight was accurate. He flinched, as if I had thrown something. "Mom, I'm sorry," he said, the words spilling out in a rush. "I am so sorry." The TV. I heard her. I heard the ladle. I turned it up. I know I did. I was a coward. I was so afraid of her, of the fighting, of her leaving me. I just made it all go away. It was easier to let her be cruel to you than to stand up to her. There's no excuse. I know that. I am so sorry. He was crying, openly, a broken man's tears. I watched him. I felt nothing. The part of me that would have crossed the room to comfort him was gone. It had been carved out. I waited for him to finish. When he was quiet, just sniffling, I asked my question. It was the only one that mattered. "Adam," I said, my voice quiet but sharp. "I have to know. If you thought I was still poor, if you thought I was still the useless old woman you'd thrown out, would you be here? Would you be making this apology if I had nothing?" He looked up, his eyes red and swollen. I saw the truth warring with the answer he wanted to give me. He tried to form a yes, but he couldn't. The lie wouldn't come. He lowered his head again. I don't know," he whispered. "Thank you," I said. "That is the first honest thing you've said to me in a year." I stood up. The eviction stands. The judgment is final. You have, I checked my watch, 8 more days to vacate the property. This is the consequence of your choices. You need to start over, from zero. You need to learn, perhaps for the first time, what it means to build a life on your own. "I'm already there," he said, his voice hollow. Brooke left. She packed her things the day after the hearing, took the SUV, left the credit card bills. I lost my job last week, for non-performance. I've been trying to find a room to rent, something cheap. I'm starting a night shift at a warehouse on Monday, loading trucks. I've also started therapy. He stood up, his legs unsteady. "I know I don't deserve anything. I wanted you to know." He walked to the door. Adam, I said. He stopped, his hand on the doorknob, his back to me. You can call me, I said, but you need to understand that I have every right not to answer. Your words, your apologies, they are just a ticket for the parking lot. They don't mean you get to drive the car. Only your actions will do that. He nodded, just once, and left, closing the door quietly behind him. The deadline was 24 hours away, but Brooke didn't wait. According to the doorman, she had left the night before, in her SUV, with 3 suitcases. She left the apartment keys on the lobby counter, along with a stack of unpaid utility bills addressed to Adam Keaton. Adam left on the final day, exactly 1 hour before the sheriff's scheduled arrival. I went up to apartment 16B with the new building manager, Mr. Evans. The apartment was clean, spotless. In fact, all the furniture was gone. The floors were vacuumed, the counters wiped. It was an empty, sterile box, smelling of bleach, and on the middle of the gleaming white quartz kitchen island, where she had insulted my cooking, lay the stainless steel ladle. He had left it. There was no note. It was just there, a silent confession, a piece of evidence left at the scene. Mr. Evans looked at it, confused. Do you want maintenance to throw this out, Mrs. Keaton? No, I said, picking it up. It felt heavy and cold in my hand. I'll take it. I took the clipboard from his hand. It was the move-out condition report. I signed my name, Lorraine Keaton, on the bottom line. The sound of the pen scratching across the paper was crisp and final, like a zipper closing on a heavy bag. When we got back to the hallway, a woman was waiting patiently by the elevator. Excuse me? She said to Mr. Evans. I'm here for the 2:30 viewing apartment 16B. Ah, yes, Ms. Albright, Evans said. The apartment is ready for you now, Mrs. Keaton is the owner. The woman, a high school history teacher, smiled at me. We walked her through the empty unit. It's perfect, she said, looking at the light. I'll take it. We signed the lease right there in the lobby, a standard 12-month agreement, at the full market rate. I met Victor back at his office to file the new lease paperwork. He handed me one last document. This came through, he said. It was a protective order, issued by the court. It was based on the medical report of the burn and the contusion at my temple, and the crystal-clear audio from the hallway security camera. It legally prohibited Brooke from coming within 100 yards of Harborview Ridge for 12 months. Victor, I said, closing the file. I want to schedule some upgrades for that building. New smoke detectors in every unit, not just the ones that are required. I want steel handrails installed in the main stairwells, and I want the community kitchen on the ground floor completely renovated. Power, I'm learning, isn't just for punishing. It's for fixing. I didn't go back to the hotel that night. I drove to Laurelhurst, a quiet neighborhood lined with old trees. I drove to a modest, single-story house with a small, neat garden, one of the properties Walter had kept, the one I had already selected for myself. It was quiet. It was mine. I walked into the new kitchen. It was simple, clean, and bright. I unpacked one box, the one labeled Kitchen Basics. I took out a large, heavy pot and placed it on the gas stove. I started cooking. I chopped celery. I diced potatoes. I sliced carrots. I made the exact same vegetable soup I had been making that night. I let it simmer, tasting it, adding just enough salt. I took the stainless steel ladle Adam's admission of guilt, and I hung it on a hook on the wall. It wasn't a tool anymore. It was a reminder that no matter how loud someone turns up the television, they can't drown out the truth. As the soup simmered, filling my new home with the aroma of thyme, my phone vibrated on the counter. It was a text message from Adam. It wasn't words. It was 2 pictures. The first was a scanned copy of a lease agreement for a small, single room in a shared house across town. The second was a photo of his first payslip from the warehouse, showing the deductions for his night shift. There was no request for money. There was no apology. Just a short, 3-word message beneath the images, "I'm doing it." I looked at the text. I looked at the soup bubbling gently on the stove, the knot that had been tight in my chest for 6 months, perhaps for years, finally uncoiled. I turned off the flame. The bubbling stopped. I wasn't his mother anymore. I wasn't Brooke's victim. I wasn't saving anyone. I was saving myself. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'm really curious. Where are you all listening from today? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to connect and hear your thoughts. Please subscribe to Grandma's Family Diary. Give this video a like and show your support by hitting that hype button so more people can hear this story.